You have just entered episode 010 of the Bit Beacon broadcast. We're recording this on November 22nd.
Mm-hmm.
About a week before we're going to release this episode. We prefer not to pre-record episodes, but one of us is going out of town.
Yep, that'd be me.
So, we just got to do what we got to do to make sure there's an episode every week. That's our goal.
That is our goal.
Hopefully we never mess that up.
And we have stuck to it for 10 episodes now.
I mean, I don't know what's going to happen if one of us, goes out of town for, more than a week.
That would be tough.
Yeah, I mean...
solutions will be in place by then, hopefully.
Right. I mean, we're going to miss an episode 1 week at some point in the future.
Yeah.
But hopefully that won't happen too much. Since we're recording this back-to-back, we don't really have anything new to talk about in terms of what have we been playing, what have we been doing.
I'm Rick, and
my
co-host,
Taylor, Kodaks, whatever you like to call me. I forgot to introduce ourselves. Yeah. Because we're doing this back-to-back, I'm confused.
Right. Yeah.
I'm lost.
So it's a new thing.
But, Rick's here to guide me through it, take my hand.
I got you covered.
We're going to get through this together.
Yep.
So we're going to jump straight into our first discussion topic. And that's both of us wanting to wish Shigeru Miyamoto a very happy birthday.
Very happy birthday. He's at the golden age of 71.
71. And you probably wouldn't think he's beyond his late 50s. He seems pretty spry for 71.
He's very spry, running out on stage with all kinds of props.
Yeah, I mean, I don't... Yeah.
Not so much anymore. But...
That was a long time ago. His birthday was on November 16th, so in the last week since we recorded, his birthday popped up. I know 71's not a milestone birthday. 70 would have been
right.
A good one.
We only started this year.
Yeah, so I mean we weren't able to celebrate his 70th birthday, but I just thought we could just talk about his career, talk about his legacy.
Definitely.
Real quick with everyone listening. So Shigeru Miyamoto, if you don't know, which you do know if you've been listening, we've talked about him on a few occasions.
Oh yeah.
He's basically the guy at Nintendo that propelled them to success in the video game world.
Yes.
Nintendo would still be making cards, probably, if not for Shigeru Miyamoto.
Yeah.
Playing cards, I mean.
In a large way, he is Mr. Video Games. He didn't invent the video game, but he brought, Shigeru Miyamoto's Nintendo brought back video games from an industry depression.
Right.
That would have ended the medium.
Yeah.
And
modern video games start with Shigeru Miyamoto.
Yes.
So many things that he designed are still in place throughout all kinds of genres and of video games to this day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have the really popular Souls games like Elden Ring and Dark Souls and Demon Souls,
mm-hmm.
and it's a huge genre now, and those games are directly inspired by The Legend of Zelda. The creator of that series, Miyazaki, has said that he directly credits The Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
If you look at the original Legend of Zelda, that game is brutal.
Oh,
that game is hard. So, it lets you go anywhere. It doesn't hold your hand.
I'm going to say something about modern games, particularly indie games, that sort of brand themselves as a Dark Souls-like game. Just referring basically to the difficulty level.
Right.
But if you really think about it, those old NES games that Shigeru Miyamoto is largely credited with, Super Mario World was pretty hard.
Yeah.
Legend of Zelda, pretty hard. Even the original Metroid, pretty hard. Other NES games that Shigeru wasn't involved with on NES, Silver Surfer is the best example.
Right.
Extremely difficult games. Try getting through those games. They are, in my opinion, harder than Dark Souls.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
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 And
I mean, the Dark Souls games, they're hard, but like they're designed in a way that you're supposed to try and learn, and then eventually overcome.
Right.
And like that's the game design. That's what the developer doesn't want you to just win instantly every single time.
Exactly.
And that can be frustrating for some players.
I feel like too, like getting shot or getting slashed with a sword is doing the amount of damage that it should be doing, like in real life.
Right.
Like, 80% of your health.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like if you take a hit, you feel it.
Yeah.
You take a second hit, you're dead.
You're dead. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, in that sense, that's the goal of those games. But I should clarify, you mentioned Metroid. I don't think Shigeru Miyamoto had much to do with Metroid.
On second thought, I think you're right.
Let's talk about some of the infamous franchises that he created.
Oh, famous.
Yeah, famous. They're not infamous. They're a good kind of famous.
Right.
So you have Donkey Kong with the original arcade game.
Yes. And real quick, just that alone, Donkey Kong ported to everything at the time.
Yeah.
Like ColecoVision, Intellivision, Atari.
Yeah.
Like it was on everything, arcade, everything. And then you had other studios doing their own Donkey Kong like versions for, to get around licensing and stuff like that. I think either Donkey Kong or a clone on the Vectrex, the old, like, I think General Electric.
Oh, okay.
Vectrex tabletop console.
Was that the one with the cartridge?
Yeah, it was like vector graphics.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, they did have cartridges.
Okay.
Donkey Kong had a massive impact, inspired entire companies.
Yeah, I mean, generations of game developers too.
Yeah.
People inspired. After Donkey Kong, he created the Mario Brothers arcade game, which was like a versus game where, you had the POW and, the enemies on the screen and you were trying to like basically...
But you weren't fighting each other, you were doing an arcade style gameplay scheme of stomping on turtles. And...
I mean... I think they were still keeping track of individual scores.
Oh, yeah, no, they were. No, I mean, like, it wasn't like...
So you could grab a shell and throw it at, Luigi or Mario or whoever.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true.
I always saw it as, like, a competitive versus...
It is, definitely.
You could choose to go at it with a second player and be like, hey, let's try to co-op this and get as far as we can, kind of a thing. And, that obviously went on to spawn the Super Mario Brothers games, which, defined side-scrolling video games until now. Still.
Right, yeah, literally inventing the platformer genre. Like, think about how big that is.
Yeah. Then, of course, The Legend of Zelda. Say No More.
Yeah.
Excite Bike.
Yeah.
Which is a classic NES game. Then you have Duck Hunt. Which, I mean, the NES Zapper.
Invented light gun gameplay, as far as I know. I don't. There might have been an arcade.
Probably was arcade. Yeah. This is the first time you got that kind of experience at home.
Right. Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Star Fox.
Yeah. Invented 3D graphics.
Yeah, on hardware that probably had no right doing 3D graphics.
Right.
And then in more recent years, I mean, I say more recent, but I'm talking more than 20 years ago now, we have Pikmin in 2001 or 2002, Nintendogs on the DS, which was a huge hit. And then, of course, on the Wii, he created the Mii concept, the little characters that you create and customize their shape and faces and everything.
There's something I'd like to add to this list.
I mean, let's talk about Mii's for one quick second.
Sure, yeah.
He, like, before all these, like, custom emojis and avatars and things like that, I mean, that happened on the Wii.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
That predates emojis.
Does it? Like, emojis existed via mobile, text, phone, SMS type stuff.
I'm just thinking, if we go back to 2006, what do phones look like then? They're flip phones, and you're not even. I don't even know that they have keyboards yet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Blackberries, I guess.
I guess you're right.
Okay,
emoticons definitely existed, right. But
that's true. But I mean, making a whole like avatar of your character.
Yeah, and then I remember Microsoft tried to copy them with their
the Xbox Live.
I think avatars. It was just called Avatar.
Yeah. What's something I'm missing on the list?
So I'm pulling up some information real fast here on the fly, but so Miyamoto actually started with Nintendo. I believe it was the late 70s. I want to say 78 or 79. Anyways, his very first task while being at Nintendo was to design the casing for one of their first generation consoles.
Okay.
And that being the I'm trying to find the name of it here. It was actually their third color TV game.
Okay.
Which was block cut. It's a Japanese word here.
So yeah, I mean, companies used to, they didn't make consoles. They would make a device that only played one single game.
Right, which was some degree of a Pong clone.
Exactly.
It was I'm not finding it right off the fly here, but
all right.
Yeah, I own it actually.
Okay.
And yeah, it was their third installment of these TV games, which had basically taken Pong and placed it in, instead of paddles, you're breaking blocks with the so actually making new games,
a new game with a similar concept.
Using Pong as sort of an engine,
right?
And yeah, he designed the exterior of that particular console.
So while he hasn't been actively creating new titles as much anymore, not since effectively the DS and GameCube era, he continues to have a huge role at Nintendo, essentially being like the final creative say in almost any project there.
Yeah.
Especially with the titles that he was involved in originally creating.
I would say that he had more of a controlling hand over things earlier in his career. Now he is a little more removed, but
I think he's a mentor more than anything now. And
right.
He seems to be involved with a lot of Nintendo's other new ventures, like the theme park and the movies, stuff like that.
Right.
But
he's kind of choosing what he loves.
I think so. He's at that age where he's like, I don't want to be in the office all day. Right. I want to go out and do new things that I haven't been able to do before.
Right, movies and theme parks.
Yeah, so I mean that's got to be really exciting for him.
Definitely. When he was in the office, I remember developers like Argonaut and one other.
Dylan Cuthbert.
Yeah, that he took their games and made something bigger out of them,
right?
In a lot of cases. Argonaut developed Croc as a pitch for a Yoshi game originally, and then got rejected, and Croc was born on PlayStation.
Okay.
But
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Argonaut developed. I think weren't they involved in the development of the original Star Fox?
I believe so. Yeah.
So.
That's Dylan Cuthbert's company.
Right.
Star Fox, a lot of people don't know, was primarily made by British people living in Japan. They had got Nintendo's attention for, I think, like a Game Boy game or something that they had made called X or Cross, something like that. And Nintendo or Miyamoto really liked what they were doing, and they brought them over to Japan, and they created games like Star Fox.
You're right. Animal Planet was being developed for Nintendo 64. Miyamoto made the decision that this needed to be a Star Fox game, and that's how Star Fox Adventures came to be.
Dinosaur Planet.
Right. That's what I meant.
Animal Planet.
What did I say? Animal Planet. Wow.
The television with Jeff Corbin or whatever his name was, Zaboomafu.
No, definitely not that. It was Dinosaur Planet.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, when you have a legacy like all of these titles, your presence is felt everywhere. Your impact is eternal at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, there will never be, and not because there aren't minds as brilliant as Shigeru Miyamoto, but there just won't be that moment in time where like the modern gaming is like birthed. Like I guess I sound maybe like like we're gonna be stagnant from here on out. I think I don't want to sound like
he's more. I think what you're trying to say is that he's more. He was there for the inception of what modern gaming is.
Yeah, and I just don't think anyone will ever have that unique of an opportunity again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there will be people who come up with wonderful ideas, but their impact will never match.
Yeah.
What I mean,
everything is. He's like the atom of like modern gaming, and that just won't happen again.
We've seen him over the years at different events, and there was one particular year. It was at E3, either 2015 or 2016. I really had it in my head that this is going to be the year I find a way to meet Shigeru Miyamoto, and I had this crazy idea. Outside of the West Hall of the Los Angeles Convention Center, there's always these SUVs parked there that have like a Nintendo magnet slapped to the side of them.
Yep.
And these are the SUVs that just sit around all day waiting for some big wig at Nintendo to walk out of the convention center and need to take off.
Right.
And so it was the end of like day one, I think, of that year's E3. And I was like, I'm gonna sit. You were there with me.
Yeah, I was.
There were a few friends that we were just chatting with outside, and I was like, I'm gonna wait here until someone comes out of that door to get into one of these SUVs, because there's like 2 or 3 SUVs parked here. So it's like, I know they're waiting for someone.
Right.
And sure enough, after about 30 minutes, Shigeru Miyamoto walks out with like some American Nintendo employee who's probably like his handler, helping him get from one place to the next.
Right.
And I'm there waiting for him. I've got my Sharpie in hand. I've got my special Mario 3DS cover plates on my 3DS. And I'm like waving him down, and I'm like, hey. And then his handler like brushes me off. He's like, no, I'm not engaging with you, And Miyamoto and him keep walking. And Miyamoto gets up to the SUV and he looks back. And he's like, real quickly, like, he waves me over, like, come on, like, hurry up. And so, he takes my Sharpie, signs my 3DS, and, I thank him, and he hops in the SUV, and he takes off.
Yeah.
And
I was standing there, like, just bewildered at what just happened, basically.
Yeah, like, I thought it was, I was surprised that no one else tried to, like, run over. Right. I mean, that's probably what he was worried about, why he waited to get over to the car so he could just
hop in
and get out of there. But I was on cloud 9 for weeks.
Yeah.
And now that E3 is dead, effectively, probably, even if it does come back in some capacity, I don't know that Miyamoto's showing up anymore.
No. I could see him not.
He's 71.
Yeah. Yeah.
We live in like a world where COVID still pops up here and there,
Do you, like, okay, so hypothetically, if you could switch out the item that you got signed, those faceplates, would you do it, like, with a game or something?
I would.
You would?
I would.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it was what I had. I had specifically brought those faceplates because they were like the only Mario faceplates I had, and they're one of the rare ones. They're the wood grain Mario face, so they feel like they're made of wood.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, if I had a copy of, Super Mario Brothers for the NES or the box for the Famicom version, I mean, that would have been my preference. I mean, I feel lucky to have anything at all
signed by him.
And something I got personally signed, not something I bought on eBay, I'll have this moment, just cherished. I remember we went to the Wolfgang Puck restaurant afterwards, and I'm just like, just staring at it like, oh my god,
yeah,
why, how did this work? Why did it work? I can't believe it worked.
Yeah,
like, what a stupid idea.
Right.
I mean, imagine how devastated I would have been though, if he was like, no, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah,
and he could have so easily made that choice.
Yeah, it just happened.
The fact that he turned around and said, sure, guy.
Yeah, it just happened.
Just still crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't think I'll ever have that opportunity again.
No, very few people ever have.
I mean, with the death of E3, I'm like lamenting, especially for Nintendo, like never having access to most of those people ever again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. Like, it'll never be the same.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be a place where like every big name at Nintendo shows up for an in-person conference again.
Right.
I mean, maybe you could get something like that.
At least not anything that's like publicly available.
Yeah, I mean, back then it still wasn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, just a crazy moment. I'm so grateful that he turned around and said sure. Yeah, it does make me sad because I'll never get that high again.
Yeah, no, that was something else.
Like, I've met some cool people since then, but it's like there's no one. I mean, I guess maybe as close as you get to Miyamoto, and he's actually not even as relevant in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But Hideo Kojima maybe,
right?
But I feel like he makes himself more accessible.
He definitely does.
He does do signings.
Yeah.
Like they're very controlled and few in number now, but they do happen from time to time. But like Miyamoto, I mean, my understanding is it's been like 20 years since he's done like a public signing.
Yeah.
I think it was like at like Japan Expo in France or something like that in the early 2000s was the last time he did something.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so just thank you, Miyamoto, for everything, and I wish you good health and keep the good times coming.
Yeah, I don't know if he's ever gonna listen to this, but if he does,
we like to pretend that they do.
Yeah, yeah, there is no bigger legend, name wise.
Yeah.
Even if he is not as intimately involved with development of projects. He's his name is just,
my understanding is he makes himself available as almost like a consultant for anybody working on a project at Nintendo. Like, you can invite me in. He's often seen as like a producer or executive producer on a lot of games. Like in Mario Wonder, his name is featured in the credits.
Yeah.
He is mostly out of game development. But well earned.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
The fact that he's still with Nintendo and hasn't retired means he's still having fun. He's still doing cool stuff, and that makes me excited. If Miyamoto's engaged, then I'm engaged.
Yeah, I agree.
So speaking of birthdays and anniversaries, and Shigeru Miyamoto,
very related.
Maybe the greatest game ever created.
Yeah, it's in the top 2 candidates. I mean,
it's hard to dispute. I mean, some people can say that another game is their favorite game.
Right.
Like a lot. So we're talking about The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time.
Right. From a design perspective,
right,
a lot of people would call this the model video game.
Right. And Ocarina of Time had a direct sequel called Majora's Mask, and there's a lot of people who say, I think Majora's Mask is the better game. And they're not wrong per se, but Majora's Mask doesn't exist.
Right. Majora's Mask is made up of all of the assets from Ocarina of Time.
I mean, it's almost an expansion.
Right. In a large way.
Yeah.
It's its own game for sure.
I agree. But it recycles all the assets. They made it really fast. It's an impressive game. Well, we're not talking about Majora's Mask. We're talking about The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time turning 25. It released on November 21st, 1998 in Japan, and on November 23rd in the US. Some fun facts. Its budget was over $12 million. 200 people more than 200 people developed the game. It was priced at $70 in 1998.
That's crazy.
That would make it $132 in 2023 money. The game had 5 directors, each tackling a different piece of the game. Future Zelda team leader Eiji Aonuma handled the game's dungeons. Shigeru Miyamoto essentially served as all of their bosses, tying the game together as the producer. Originally, the game structure was envisioned to work much like Super Mario 64. If you remember that game, you have Peach's castle, and you kind of jump into these portraits and go to different levels.
Right.
Whereas Ocarina of Time was a much more open and seamless game.
Yeah.
Still
had loading screens,
yeah,
but yeah.
Yeah. It was originally conceived as a 64DD launch title. For those of you that don't know, the 64DD was a floppy disk drive attachment for the... Well, not quite floppy.
No,
it was like hard
they were round disks.
Yeah. Disk drive attachment for the N64 that only ever released in Japan and only had like 10 titles or something like that.
Yeah, and even those units are pretty scarce.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like Doshin the Giant. That's like one of the most expensive games, period, I think.
Fun fact, the development units are out there for the DD, and they're blue. They look just like a black one, but they're blue.
Nice. So it's often considered to be the greatest game of all time, like I've mentioned. It holds the highest Metacritic rating of any game ever released. So, in 25 years, no game has surpassed its critical aggregated score effectively. Its influence is still seen today. I mean, any game with like lock-on targeting.
Yeah.
That started here.
That started there.
Yeah.
And open world pretty much started here.
Action adventure game.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a 3D
way.
Yeah, like this game nothing had been seen like it before.
No. And also I don't think you mentioned this, but you mentioned the price point being $70. It launched with the expansion pack.
That's right.
So that was a new thing, a new hardware.
The expansion pack came with Ocarina of Time, or was that Majora's Mask?
You know what? Was Donkey Kong 64 launched with the Rumble pack, or was that the expansion pack? I can't remember.
I think Star Fox had the Rumble pack.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you're right. I know that...
I don't think Ocarina of Time requires the expansion pack, but Majora's Mask does.
Yeah, you're right.
Maybe Ocarina of Time can make use of the expansion or the storage.
I think so.
Yeah, but
something like that. I remember something prohibited me from playing, and it might have been Majora's Mask.
Okay, yeah, I think that was Majora's Mask. If you try to play the game today, it's still very, very playable.
Yeah. It's very playable.
I mean, the controls make... I mean, the only thing that's maybe confusing is you don't have 2 sticks, like the way you do with a modern controller.
Right.
Because on the N64, there was only the one control stick.
Right, well... you couldn't rotate the camera in that game.
I think... Could you use the C buttons, maybe?
Yeah, you use the C buttons for the inventory items.
Right. So the targeting was a big deal. You needed the Z targeting in order to help the camera function and see the game.
It would also, when you didn't have enemies present, it would look forward.
Exactly.
Like reset the camera.
Yeah. And it would help you find things of interest to read and know and pay attention to.
What makes it stand out so much, aside from all the things we already mentioned, is how memorable it is. And I think everybody who's ever played Ocarina of Time remembers their first playthrough. They remember where they were. They remember how they got the game.
I remember the first time I ever played it. I don't remember buying the game, but I did eventually get my own copy.
Mm-hmm. I bought mine at a flea market when I was in Michigan.
Okay.
And brought it home, and my cousin bought a copy separately, and we would switch out the freaking memory cards or the game or whatever. to like catch up to each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I know how to do this part. Give me the cartridge. Yeah, for me, I was visiting my dad, who lived a little further south in California, and I was hanging out with some kid in the neighborhood, and he was talking about the Zelda game. Mm-hmm. And he was like describing this tree to me and how he's stuck and can't get past this. And in my head, the most recent Zelda game I have played is Link to the Past. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking he was talking about, like, there's this like little forest area where there's like this like elf guy sitting on the tree and he's like playing a flute or something like that. And I was like, oh, I know how to get past, or I know what to do there. Yeah. And so then I remember going over to his house, and he had an N64 and I did not have one yet. Yeah. And I was like, this is a different game. Yeah. And I just remember spending, what felt like 3 or 4 hours just wandering around Kokiri Village. Yeah.
That first time you see that is like, what?
That's all, just that little tiny area. Yeah. You could spend hours there.
I remember when Master Quest came out on the GameCube, Best Buy had a demo unit going on in the store. And everyone had to go get the sword. Like, everyone in the store had to go get the sword. It was, and I'm standing by like, I know how to do it. Yeah. Let me show you how to do it.
Yeah, it was just truly a special moment. I have one of those gaming confessions that I'd rather not mention.
Well, now you have to.
I've never beaten
Ocarina of Time. The shame.
I picked it back up when they did the 3DS re-release, the remaster, or the remake, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Back in 2012, I think it was.
Which was really good.
Yeah, we actually covered it on the Bit Beacon.
Yeah, we did.
We managed to get the game, I think, a couple days early via a little mom and pop shop we knew of. Yep. And Rick, I think even you wrote a review and everything for the game.
I did. And I beat it.
Yeah.
Again.
So I got to the point, I was about to go into the water temple for the first time as an adult Link. Yep. And I was ready to go, and I went to go play it, and a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, took it upon himself to play a portion of the game for me and ruined my desire to continue playing.
The relevance, I guess, for the reason that was such an important moment was because I don't know if you want to
sure, go ahead.
Okay. Was to enter the water temple, you have to shoot an arrow up into the eye little switch target thing. Uh-huh. And doing that in this new 3D mode back when the 3DS was brand new and it was a big deal, that was supposed to be special, which it would have been.
And I was robbed of that moment.
Yeah, you were robbed. So that kind of turned you off.
Yeah, I immediately, I was so upset. And I lost interest. And this person listens to this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
That I'm talking about. So
he knows who he is.
He knows who he is, and he should be shamed. Yeah. He should feel shame.
If you see him throw rocks.
I hope you feel bad. You know who you are. But yeah, I don't know. Just talking about it again.
It enrages you.
Well, it enrages me, but it makes me want to actually go back and finally play through this game.
I don't know how you haven't done it. You're missing out on one of the biggest moments in video game history ever.
And I've played every single Zelda game, or I've beaten every single Zelda game starting from the Wii or GameCube onward. Mm-hmm. There's not a single one I've missed out on. And so I'm just, I need to go back.
Well, technically, Master Quest is on GameCube, as is the Zelda.
Okay, I haven't, edition. But it's originally an N64 game. Yeah. So I haven't done it. I haven't finished the N64 games, and I feel like I can't. If I haven't beaten Ocarina of Time, then I can't beat Majora's Mask, and I need to do one before I do the other. Now, that's not to say I haven't played the heck out of both of these games.
Yeah.
I've probably spent so many hours on the N64 messing around in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, playing large portions of the games, but I never did finish them.
You should just do it on Nintendo 64. Like, do it on the original hardware, because that last moment, the final battle with Ganon.
Thinking I would probably... I wouldn't do it on N64, because I don't want to spend $150 on some special converter that doesn't introduce any lag, plugging it into a modern TV. So what I would do, though, is I have the N64 Switch controller, the official N64 Switch controller.
Right.
And I'd play the...
Virtual Console?
Well, it's not Virtual Console anymore.
Whatever.
It's Nintendo Switch Online.
Same thing.
N64 version, which is like... it's a more accessible game. It gives me save states so I can save and pause the game when it's convenient for me and not when it's convenient for the game.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's a cop-out. Just play it on the original hardware.
No, that's too much work for me to do. And it would require me to spend money that I don't feel like spending. Because, I don't have a CRT TV. I wish I did.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had a CRT. Like, if I ever see one on the side of a road, I'm stopping.
Yeah,
I'm checking. I'm going to take it home and see if I can plug it in and make it work.
That little TV I have on my desk at home that I use for computer monitor has...
It has those, but it's not a CRT. So it's going to... Basically, it's doing a conversion.
Mm-hmm.
And that conversion introduces lag.
I don't know, man.
It does.
That thing is old.
If you're actually going to have the real authentic retro gameplay, those games were designed to work on a CRT TV.
Yeah.
They were built around players using a CRT TV.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you really want to be authentically retro, that's how you do it.
Sure.
All right. Well, you have your gatekeeping stuff, and I have my gatekeeping stuff.
All right.
But yeah, I really do want to get around to finally playing through them.
Yeah, I don't know how you haven't done that.
It's embarrassing. But yeah, for me, especially countless hours with my brother as a kid too. Just us sitting side by side. My turn with the controller, your turn with the controller. Like, you died, my turn.
There's just so many moments, like just Hyrule Field, the introduction to Hyrule Field, the owl,
entire Saturdays, just gone.
Lon Ranch, you remember all of it.
You could just sit there and listen to Malon sing all day.
Yeah, right. Bottom of the Well, there's just so many memorable moments when you walk into Kokori Village and everything's on fire.
What are the enemies called?
Stalfos?
No.
Dead Hands?
No. The mummies.
Gibdos. They're Gibdos.
Gibdos?
Yeah.
Okay, they're the ones that me and my brother used to use a word to describe what they would do to Link.
Oh. Okay.
They latch onto Link and they stop you from moving, and they look like naked mummies.
Oh, Redeads is what you're talking about.
Redeads. Okay, I was like, Gibdo doesn't.
The Gibdos are the ones with the mummy bandages.
Okay. But I'm talking specifically about the ones that you encounter.
The zombie ones.
Yeah, the
are
zombies.
Redeads.
Yeah, those frightened me.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The sound effect that would play.
The first time you see them is when you walk into Hyrule Castle Town Market as adult.
Yeah.
Just coming out of the...
Wait, what's the... Okay, you go to the graveyard in Kakariko Village.
Yeah.
And you go underground inside one of the graves.
Yeah, so that was when you meet Dampe, who is the guy that gives you the hook shot.
But I feel like the Redeads were in there.
They were, but... So what you become adult Link, you're in the Temple of Time. Okay. You exit the Temple of Time.
Right.
You're in Hyrule Castle Town Market.
The market.
There are Redeads all walking around screaming.
Yeah. And then you let them grab you.
And that place, it was so lively when you were a kid. You know, it's like people bustling
and
around.
Now all those people,
they're all dead, and there's these zombies walking, and everything's on fire.
Yeah.
It's like...
It implies that all those happy people you saw...
It's so, like, you think back and you're like, how did they...
Right.
How did they put this together? Like, how did they...
What's the time? Like 7 years?
7 years in between, Yeah.
Just how Ganondorf has ruined everything.
Yeah, it just... The experience, though.
Yeah.
Like, and the contrast.
It's a masterclass in, like,
it is
how to communicate story without, like, you know, hours of dialogue.
Right.
You know? Like,
and when you do, it's like a eureka thing. Like, no one can ever duplicate that, or you'll know where it's coming from.
Right. Okay, so we're gonna move on to some news now, right?
All right.
Yeah. So Ocarina of Time, maybe the greatest game ever made.
Yeah.
It is for a lot of people. I respect the heck out of it.
Yeah. You can't not.
Yeah.
Even if you don't like it for some reason, you can't not respect it.
Exactly. So we're going to talk some news now. We got a bunch of SEGA topics to discuss this week. The first thing we're going to talk about, though, is Atlus, which is now a subsidiary of SEGA as of almost a decade ago now, I think.
Yeah.
Atlus being spelled ATLUS.
Right. Not like the map.
We talked about, Rick purchased 2 weeks ago, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Rick picked up a bunch of Persona games.
Persona 3 on every console.
Yeah, and those are created by Atlus.
Yes.
And Atlus has announced that they are going to be raising the wages of all their employees in Japan. By April of 2024, Atlus will have raised the average annual salary of all employees by 15%. Now, normally, we're talking about bad news when it comes to employers and employee relations.
Yes.
So this is nice to hear, an employer doing something good for their people.
Yeah. And that's pretty significant. 15%.
15% raise?
Yeah. That's not even like a small adjustment. No. That's lifestyle changing.
Yeah, that's like a lot of extra money in your pocket.
Right.
So Atlus says these changes are due to their games selling well overseas, and that bonuses based on game performance will also become standard at the company.
Nice.
So, a lot of companies, when their games do well, sell so many copies, or when they reach like a certain Metacritic rating threshold, they give out bonuses, or the publishers will give bonuses or extra residuals to the developer.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of stupid when things like this are tied to Metacritic ratings.
Yeah,
But believe it or not, that's like a strong industry standard practice.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The game directors are getting huge bonuses
based on Metacritic
scores. Yeah.
It should be based on numbers.
I think that's more of a Western thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably starting to spread elsewhere.
Yeah.
So primarily the reason they're doing this is to attract and retain their current talent. It's a really competitive industry in Japan, and Atlus joins other developers like Monolith Soft, Capcom, Koei Tecmo, and Bandai Namco, who have also been increasing their wages across the board.
Yeah. Which is a great trend. You'll love to see it.
Yeah, Japan is notorious for paying very small salaries.
Yeah. Even you were telling me privately, even here, it's seen as, especially in the QA areas and stuff, it's seen as like game developers are generally paid low.
Yeah.
Japan is even lower.
Now, cost of living is different in Japan, although some parts of Japan are very expensive to live in.
Right.
But game developers and game publishers in Japan, they also have other benefits that they offer beyond like salary. Some of these give some developers like Nintendo, they give like a housing stipend and things like that, so they help pay for where you live and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So you got to take that into account too when you look at a person's total benefits.
That's income in a way.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just nice to see someone doing something good, and this continuing to be a trend over there.
And yeah, you got to give credit to not just to Atlas, but Monolith, Capcom, Koei Tecmo, Namco Bandai.
Bamco Nandai.
That's the title of
That's the title, maybe. Bamco Nandai. I think that wins.
So I mean, all these Japanese companies are doing this probably to compete with each other. Let's be real.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't totally out of their goodwill,
right?
Like I said, this is being done to retain and attract talent. I think the pool is maybe small over there. I mean, everyone knows that Japan has a big population problem. Mm-hmm. Like, there's nowhere near as many young people as there are old people.
Nope. And they tend to aim toward other careers, like more serious kind of.
Believe it or not, I think in Japan, it's a more accepted role to want to be a game designer. I don't think people necessarily look down on it. Like, it's a big. Like at all major colleges in Japan, like they all offer that as like a career path at their schools.
Okay.
When
that's probably a modern
one of their biggest exports is video game entertainment,
right?
For sure,
right.
Whereas, like, I think still here in the States, hey ma, I'm going to video game school. You know, like not everyone's going to be as accepting of that.
That must have changed, because I know back in the day that, like, when we talked about the those contests that Enix used to do, like, those people have talked about some of their stories and what it was like with telling their parents that I want to be a game designer.
I mean, we're going back to the late 80s, early 90s now.
I think that may have switched a bit.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, look at the success so many people found back then.
Right. I mean, like, between Japan and the West.
Oh, like, the perceptions.
Perception may have switched.
Definitely. So that's really it on that story. Just a small topic, but just some good news. There's not much to say about good news. Bad news is always more interesting.
That's where we get all passionate and start disagreeing.
Our next topic, Rick's gonna take this one over.
All right. So we have some news coming out of SEGA, which is also related to Atlas, since SEGA owns Atlas. They did an interview with CNBC, and the Shuji Utsumi.
Yeah, that sounds pretty right.
The SEGA COO, chief, what is
operating
that?
Officer.
Operating officer. Dispelled some rumors about SEGA wanting to be or positioning themselves in the industry to get purchased. Like, we see these acquisitions happening. It's been widely speculated by a lot of people that SEGA's kind of seems to be
positioning themselves to be bought out.
Right. And
they've trimmed some fat from their company and tried to make themselves look a little more lean.
Right. And tried to.
I mean, that's just how people have been perceiving
it. That didn't come from any information given by SEGA. But now we have SEGA actually responding with their chief operating officer telling us that that's not their intention.
I think we've got a direct quote from him.
Okay, go for it.
So when asked about the rumors of being purchased by Microsoft, he said, many companies are interested in SEGA. We feel honored. We have attractive IPs and potentials. Companies owned by the owner, a strong owner. I don't think that kind of transaction is going to happen. And if my English didn't sound very good there, that's a direct quote, so...
Google Translate.
No, this is from an English article.
Oh, okay.
I just think maybe his English isn't, perfect,
Makes sense.
And so Sega actually said they're looking to do the opposite of being acquired. They want to do their own acquisitions.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, Sega already owns Atlas, so...
earlier this year, they acquired Angry Birds developer Rovio for $775 million.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
That's a big chunk of cash. For Angry Birds, effectively.
Yeah. Which is crazy. That's interesting.
Right?
That is interesting.
I remember being a little puzzled when I heard about this. I was like, they want Angry Birds?
Yeah, I guess I could see it as a Sega property. But also, too, does this mean Sega's really trying to lean mobile?
I think this is them giving themselves a foothold in the mobile space. Not only that, Angry Birds is like a movie property now.
It is, yeah.
They've had like 2 movies, I think, already.
Yeah. I saw one in theaters.
So, I mean, it's, they're clearly, with the Sonic movies, and now they have Angry Birds movies probably in the future. And they even mention in the article that Sega's looking to bring some of their IPs outside the world of video games. And it's in the article, it's seen that they were hinting at stuff like Persona and Yakuza, being developed into either movies or series.
I could see Yakuza. That would be crazy.
I mean, that would be, I feel like, the easiest one to adapt.
Right.
I mean, there is like a zaniness to those games.
Yeah, right. With the cash flying out of enemies and stuff. Yeah.
But I mean, they could try to keep that zaniness. I would recommend that they do if they try to make a movie. I mean, like, those games can get really serious too.
Yeah.
But I think it's an important part of its identity to keep kind of the silliness aspect of it as well.
Yeah, that zaniness for me is what makes them feel like a Sega game.
Right.
Like you saw the same kind of zaniness in old arcades, Sega games like Gunblade and those Time Crisis. Reminds me a lot of that.
Yeah.
It's kind of part of Sega's identity, like how Nintendo has theirs and their games feel Nintendo.
Right. I mean, we're seeing more and more that companies are looking to take their IPs outside of just video games.
Yeah.
Especially when they can license it or kind of hand it over to like a third party to take care of everything. Like Capcom has been making Capcom and Konami have been making a lot of like Netflix, anime, like TV shows and things like that. We're seeing there's like 4 different like Castlevania series now.
Yeah.
And so like it's free money.
Yeah. It is. It's kind of surprising it hasn't happened sooner, although one could argue that video game movies have been a thing for a long time.
Right.
They just haven't been successful.
Yeah, mostly flops.
With a few exceptions. The 90s Mortal Kombat film was actually a really... I don't know, you could say it's a bad movie, but it was successful.
Right. I mean, the theme song alone
that was a big
lasted, till now. It's even incorporated in the games.
Oh, martial arts like studios and stuff play that when sparring and stuff like that. But Techno Syndrome is what that's called.
Okay.
We've seen video game movies really kind of take a new turn in the present.
I think there's a little more... Like, I did just say that they hand them over to a third party and let them do it, but I think there's a little more caretaking being done than that.
Yeah.
But it's almost like they're hiring or shifting people to new roles to oversee those things, rather than just licensing it out and letting some random foreigner do whatever they want with it. There is sort of like a stewardship over the project, so that it doesn't, veer too far off from what they would want it to be.
Yeah.
Like we said, Miyamoto has taken over sort of a new role in this like multimedia portion of Nintendo. And so I think we're going to see more companies, especially Sega, who has such a wide swath of IPs that could easily be transitioned into, a more broad, consumable format.
Sega in particular feels to me like they're very gung-ho about these movies because they saw success with the original Sonic movie here, the recent one. I don't know if they're, not any of the animated films from back in the day, the modern one.
So we got Sonic 1 and 2.
And as Sonic 2 came out, it came out with the announcement of Sonic 3.
And,
like they
and a Netflix series that ties into the Sonic movie.
Right.
I think it's a Knuckles series.
Yeah, that's right. And now, I mean, it just looks like Sega wants to go big on movies.
I mean, the movies are solid.
Yeah, they are. They're good movies.
You can't really fault them for anything.
Sega is making money with those movies. So I'd say let it happen.
Yeah.
Bring more, IPs and stuff to film.
So yeah, it's kind of cool to just imagine that we could be living in a world where we get more involved with Sega. We talked about Sega a couple weeks ago and how they were talking about wanting, to create the new Sonic, the next Sonic.
Right.
And, I imagine they want that. They want to create a big new IP so they can also, spread that IP into other media. I mean, Pokemon's been doing this since day one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wait.
They've got a TV show. They've got movies. They've got
before
manga,
Nintendo even
games.
owned Pokemon. It was doing that.
Yeah.
And speaking of Pokemon, the Detective Pikachu film, I feel, is maybe not responsible for like this turn of video game movies, but was kind of the first one in this.
Yeah, I feel like it was the first video game movie that was like, okay, these can be taken a little more seriously now.
Right.
And then Sonic came out a year later, and
basically in the footsteps.
Right, and did even better numbers than Detective Pikachu did, which is surprising.
Yeah.
But and now then Sonic 2 came out a couple of years after that and did even bigger numbers than Sonic 1 did.
And it's good. It's really good.
Yeah, I need to get around to watching the second one. I did enjoy the first one a bit. Okay, so we've got another topic also having to do with Sega, but we're bringing it back over to the United States. And we're going to Orange County, California.
Yep.
Irvine, where Sega America's offices are at. Kotaku broke the news that Sega is planning to phase out, and that's a quote, all of their temp workers by end of February 2024. Most of Sega's temp employees are in the localization and quality assurance departments. Sega says their positions will be outsourced to offices in Japan and Europe. So, layoffs, right? They're happening all the time. But these ones have a little asterisk with them. Earlier this year, Sega, over 200 employees at Sega's Irvine offices successfully unionized. All of these temporary workers are a part of the union. This affects about 80 of the 200-ish members of the union. The union, Allied Employees Guild Improving Sega, or AEGIS, which means protection from the Greek language, has filed an unfair labor practice complaint with the National Labor Relations Board. The union believes these layoffs are being instituted in retaliation in response to the forming of the union.
Right.
Union representative Elise Williker, a senior QA tester at Sega, says it's disheartening to see such actions from Sega, as it unmistakably demonstrates bad faith bargaining and a refusal to recognize the valuable contributions of a significant portion of our colleagues. We have filed an unfair labor practice charge to call out Sega's direct dealings with members and its breaching of the status quo by telling bargaining unit members that our jobs would be ending shortly. Sega will not be allowed to get away with this unlawful behavior. We call on the company to make all temporary employees permanent and return to the bargaining table in good faith. There is no other just alternative. It's possible that this complaint won't make it through the NLRB investigation before the layoffs occur in February. These things tend to take a while.
Right.
So even if the NLRB finds Sega at fault, these employees will have been laid off, but that might put Sega on the hook for basically giving these people back pay of some kind.
Right.
Which, I don't know, maybe Sega is thinking we'd rather give them some back pay than continue to pay them permanently.
Right.
This is a complex...
Yeah, it is definitely a complex thing. And there's a lot of different...
There's a lot of stuff we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that a lot of questions that we kind of need answers to, really, to say, like, who, I don't know. What about, what aspects of this are wrong and what aspects of this is right, So I can understand from Sega's perspective why they, a Japanese company might see a bunch of Western employees doing this, unionizing and stuff, and just be like, this is a problem for us.
This is not what we signed up for.
Yeah, basically, yeah, this isn't what we wanted. So we're just going to close that office and put it here in Japan.
I mean...
that's going to affect a lot of livelihood.
Right. I mean, unions only exist because employers don't treat their employees well. So employees feel the need to unionize to get treated the way they feel they should be treated.
Right. And I understand that.
And these layoffs are specifically affecting typically the most poorly paid individuals in the industry.
It said what? QA?
Quality assurance, which are basically, game testers, and localization people. And these people are all already temporary workers, right. So they're like even more at will than, at will employees are.
Right.
Many of them, I'm sure, don't know from one project to the next if they'll be sticking around or not.
Right.
So, I mean, there's already probably a sense of, like, oh man, am I going to be here in 2 months,
Right.
But now they know they're not going to be here in 2 months.
Yeah. Layoffs are always bad, no matter if you're union or not. Like, we don't like to see layoffs in the games industry, but people move around, people end up at other companies, and sometimes that's how games get made. But we've been seeing a trend with layoffs, especially on Sony's side of things.
I mean, everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, and, these employees saw those trends, and they thought the way to protect themselves would be to form a union.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, I can definitely see why these kinds of employees, which are mostly the 200-ish people, are from all areas of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of them are in marketing as well.
Those people are staying,
Yeah, they're not temporary workers.
Right.
This specifically is affecting their temporary workers.
I also question, at the end of the day, I mean, on the face of things, it does have the appearance that Sega might be doing this because they're unionized. And I understand how someone would immediately think that, obviously.
Well, the union felt that way.
Yeah, and the union as well.
I mean, it sounds like, based on the quote, that they were still bargaining and still figuring out new contracts with Sega.
If you do think about this, though, they are already temp. Like, you were, unless you got a permanent job, you were going to go.
Right. I mean,
and then
there
also,
are rules about firing people.
Right, yeah, I know that.
Yeah, so it's like, you can be fired not for any specific reason, but you can be fired for no reason.
Right.
At least here in California.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, if it's determined that these were a retaliatory firing, Sega will be in trouble. Not only will they owe back pay and things like that to employees, they may be forced to offer them their jobs back,
mm-hmm.
and they'll likely be fined big time by the NLRB.
Yeah. But, I mean...
I should mention Sega declined to comment for this story.
Yeah.
Which is probably the smart thing to do.
Right. Because, from a public relations standpoint, this doesn't look good in any way it's spun, and anything you say is gonna make you look bad.
Yeah.
Looking at the details, are talking about putting their QA team in Japan. I mean,
well, to me, it doesn't really scream like they're not even offering to like relocate these people because they're so cheap to begin with, probably.
Right.
And they probably, their offices in Japan and Europe are probably not unionized.
Mm-hmm.
So they see this as a way to minimize. I mean, this could be a way that they see this a way to minimize the union's impact on their operations in the U.S.
It could be.
Yeah, I mean, 80 out of 200 is a big chunk.
Yeah, that is.
Now, I think localization. Okay, this could have an impact on Sega beyond what they're implying. This could have an impact on games releasing with quality, localizations. Because now the English is all happening in Europe.
Right.
Okay, so now I guess we're just getting like a British person's perspective on the English language.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's concerning.
And not to mention that could affect speed of these things getting localized.
So there's no localization happening in Irvine anymore? Is that how this is reading?
I mean, it's all of the... I mean, maybe there are senior people, but like, it seems like the grunts, the temps, they're all gone.
Yeah.
And now my understanding, I follow a few localization people on Twitter, now known as X.
Yeah.
And my understanding is most of them are all temp workers. Like they get an assignment, and then that assignment ends, and they got to look for another job localizing a game.
Right. Or they get invited to work on the next one.
Sometimes, yeah, but sometimes there might be like a 5-month gap before the next one.
Right.
So
and that's why they're temp.
Yeah. Now I feel like companies could do better to streamline that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But that involves, going back to the development level. That's why I think Nintendo has some union problems too that they got in trouble for earlier this year with a lot of their quality assurance people. But yeah, it's, the people that are forming unions in the game industry tend to be quality assurance, low, underpaid,
they're also
under-respected.
They're also the departments that are getting the layoffs.
Yeah.
Right now from everybody.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could understand, and I totally get why they would want to form a union to try to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Instead, it's possibly had the opposite effect and gotten them all fired.
It could be that. And there's a good chance it is that.
And we'll find out eventually. I mean, whenever this, the NLRB gets around to doing their investigation, it'll be curious to see what their findings were, and hopefully like all the documentation is going to be available for public reading.
Right.
Because I'm curious to see if they are found at fault if Sega is found at fault for this, like what will their
repercussions?
Yeah. I'm very curious to see what can be done. But we'll keep an eye on this.
Yeah,
we probably won't.
This sounds like it might be one of our ongoing stories.
I imagine come February we'll hear about it again when and if these employees do indeed get laid off, unless maybe Sega backs off for some reason.
That's a possibility too.
But otherwise, sometime next year, I imagine we'll see what the findings were.
Yeah.
So we are breezing right along. All right. We've got one more fun anniversary to celebrate. Also, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time came out on November 21st in 1998. In 2003, one of my personal favorite games of all time.
Same.
Released.
Don't gatekeep.
I mean, I'm just saying mine. I'm just speaking for myself. I don't want to say our favorite game.
Right.
But Pokemon Coliseum turns 20 years old this year.
I remember the TV commercials.
Describe it to me.
It showed the protagonist,
Wes,
who's an ex-villain, which makes him edgy and
cool.
Yeah,
he's got this
badass trench coat.
Yeah.
In the stadium, and this camera zoom thing.
Yeah.
That's all I remember. Okay. But it was like, it was cool. Like, yeah.
So what makes Pokemon Coliseum so special is that it was the first time we had a Pokemon RPG in like a 3D format. Right. You know, where we weren't looking at flat pixels on a screen. We had 3D models, exploring environments.
Where you could actually walk around as a character.
Yeah. I mean, we had Pokemon Stadium on the N64. And Pokemon Coliseum is in some ways a successor to Stadium. Oh, yeah. It does pull a lot of assets from the N64 games.
Yeah. Well, the models?
All the Pokemon models, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. But it included, the primary focus was not just battling computers like it was with Pokemon Stadium. Mm-hmm. There was this huge story mode tagged alongside of it.
It was in a lot of ways, a full-blown Pokemon RPG.
It is. It's 100%. It's, in my opinion, it's a canon entry alongside Pokemon Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, Silver, Crystal, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, and so forth. And it was created to specifically tie in with a third-generation series of games, Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green. Mm-hmm. And you could, after you beat the game, you could connect via the GameCube, Game Boy Advance cable. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the official terminology right now. And you could like trade with the game. You could send your Pokemon over to it. But some other things set this apart from just being like, a Pokemon game in 3D.
Yeah.
So this featured several unique mechanics, specifically Shadow Pokemon. These are Pokemon whose hearts have been artificially closed by Team Snag'em and Cypher.
Yeah.
And these are like the kind of antagonist teams in the game.
Yeah. Team Snag'em.
Snag'em, they're kind of like grunts. Yeah. You know, the silly kind of goofy grunts. But Team Cypher were like the real villains behind the whole thing. The main character, Wes, is able to steal these shadow Pokemon from trainers using a special device that he's seen just taking from the facility in the intro of the game. And he wears this device, and his companion, Rui?
I don't know her official name. I named her Misty.
Okay. I mean, she has a Mistiest look to her for sure. I think her name is RUI, the canon name. Mm-hmm. She's able to detect when an opposing trainer has a shadow Pokemon, and that allows you, the main player, to capture that Pokemon.
Yeah. So it's the first time you could steal a Pokemon from another trainer.
The only time,
really. The only time, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you use Game Shark.
I guess, I did do some of that.
Yeah.
So, after you caught a shadow Pokemon, you would need to purify this Pokemon. And that involved you using it in battle and walking around with it, and its purification status would go down. You'd then take it to this special shrine in this certain town, and this purification process would happen.
Celebi flies in.
Yeah, and helps you save the Pokemon. Now, while they're in their shadow form, they do have access to like certain abilities and moves that they don't normally. But once you do purify it, those moves do go away.
Mm-hmm. I don't think you have it in the notes, but it's the only Pokemon game that's exclusively double battles. Like,
yes. Actually, it is. It's one of the next.
Okay, sorry.
But let's talk about it. So the whole entire game is double battles, which means instantly there's an extra layer of difficulty and strategy not ever seen in any main series game since.
Definitely. And your starting Pokemon are Espeon and Umbreon, which is like just this
it's wild.
Perfect, duality thing.
Yeah. The good and evil, the night and dark or night and day. After you purify the Pokemon and beat the game, like I said earlier, you could transfer these Pokemon to the Game Boy Advance games. Most of these Pokemon were Pokemon you could not capture in Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green. They were mostly Johto Pokemon.
Yes.
So this gave you access to like the legendary beasts, like Suicune, Entei,
and Raikou.
Raikou.
There were quite a few Gen 3 Pokemon too.
Yeah, there were a handful of Gen 3 Pokemon as well. But and you could also, via a special battle mode, you could unlock a Ho-Oh for transfer to your game as well.
Right.
You had to do 100 battles in a row, and you only had like 3 continues, so you could only lose 3 times.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would reset the whole entire thing.
That was the Stadium Tower thing, right?
Mount Battle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you just kept going up these platforms, 100 in a row. Yeah.
I remember. I did it.
I did it to the soundtrack of the Six Flags.
Really?
Bum, 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 bum. I'm not kidding you. I sat down when it was high school, so I was like a freshman or a sophomore, I think.
Yeah.
And I just grinded all 100 battles in one sitting and had that song on loop all day long. We like to party. So yeah, whenever I play that game, I like associate that song.
Yeah.
When I replayed it during the pandemic, I did Mount Battle again.
Yeah.
And I had that shit going.
Jeez.
The double battles were a huge aspect, and I've heard that the second DLC for Scarlet and Violet is going to exclusively use double battles.
Wow.
Yeah, so kind of cool.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and like previews just went out for the second DLC. They invited some members of the press to try it out, and apparently it's pretty challenging. Like, you have to have some strategies for these battles.
It's weird. We've seen a lot of kind of callbacks. Not a lot, but a number of recent callbacks to Colosseum, I feel like.
Dude, don't even get my, brain thinking.
Like, it's just a weird thing. I don't think anything of it, but, Shadow Pokemon were introduced into Pokemon Go.
Right.
Clearly,
that's the most direct reference we've seen to Pokemon Colosseum.
Yeah.
And Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, which we'll talk about another day.
Yeah.
Referred to by modern Pokemon.
Yeah.
They've been largely ignored over the years.
But I mean, if they're introducing or making, did you say exclusive double battles in the DLC Part 2?
It's from what I was reading, all the battles that people took part in, not wild battles, but trainer battles, were all double battles.
Okay.
So you may want to work on a double battle team strategy before.
I mean, that is what Colosseum's the only other game to have done that.
This is just a DLC, not a whole game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some fun facts. It's set in a brand new region, or at the time it was brand new, called Orre, O-R-R-E. Phoenix, Arizona, of all places, is cited as being the inspiration for the region.
I can see that now that I didn't even know
remember
that.
Phoenix, Arizona in the early 2000s, you know? Yeah. What's the name of the town, the first big town you go to?
Oh, I don't.
It's got this cool.
It's got a big fountain in front.
Grungy. Oh no, not Phoenix City. The first kind of shady.
Oh, the Under.
Well, the Under is the area under.
Yeah. The really brown kind of
and it's got neon signs and industrial everywhere. Yeah.
I forgot what it's called.
Oh well.
I know the city you're talking about.
Yeah.
The Kids Grid.
Yeah, that's the network of kid spies who are trying to take down
I love
Team Cypher.
I love that stuff.
Duking.
Yeah.
The
Mirror B,
the greatest Pokemon trainer of all time.
They need to bring him back.
Yes. So players who pre-ordered Pokemon Colosseum in the US were given a bonus disc for their GameCube, which would allow them to connect it to Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire for the Game Boy Advance to download Jirachi to their games. Mm-hmm. Outside of Pokemon Go, this disc is the only possible way that players have a chance at obtaining a legitimate shiny Jirachi. The chances are 1 out of 7,200 to get a shiny from the disc.
Wow.
So yeah, in every other game Jirachi has been in, which is almost none, it's shiny locked. Yeah. I think in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl you can get a gift Jirachi.
Yeah.
But it's shiny locked.
Yeah.
And most other Jirachis have just been distributed as part of events.
Right.
So those are all just duped Pokemon,
clones
essentially.
of each other.
But yeah, and it wasn't, apparently it was not intended for it to be shiny, but I guess due to some glitch in the programming, it was able to be shiny. Gotcha. And Pokemon has basically had to recognize that Jirachi can be shiny. So things like Pokemon Home and Pokemon Bank, they do checks for things like that. And if a Pokemon isn't supposed to be shiny, it won't like accept it.
Right. You know? So they were forced
to acknowledge that it could happen. Here's something that's crazy. If you got shiny Jirachi from Pokemon Go and you transferred it to Pokemon Home and you wanted to bring it to Scarlet and Violet, you can't.
Really?
Yes, because for whatever reason, when it comes to like mythical and legendary Pokemon, like Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet have something where they won't let you bring that shiny into the game if it's from Pokemon Go, unless you already have one captured from one of the main series games.
That has to be shiny?
Yes. So if you want to bring your Jirachi from Pokemon Go that you've transferred to Home, you would have to have one of these Wishmaker Jirachis from this GameCube bonus disc.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So it's stuck in Home or Go forever, unless they roll back that restriction at some point.
Right. Well, Bank, is we don't know how much longer that's going to be around, so that would mark the end of this thing.
Yeah, so you would need to get your hands on a shiny Wishmaker Jirachi soon.
Like now.
So fun fact about the bonus disc, it now is more valuable than Pokemon Coliseum itself, which is already a really valuable game. This bonus disc sells for about $200 complete in box and $300 sealed on eBay. I checked these numbers just yesterday.
Wow.
Japanese players who pre-ordered were given a special disc that allowed them to unlock Celebi in Pokemon Coliseum. But they first had to complete the game fully and have every single Shadow Pokemon fully purified. Another little known fact, in Japan, e-reader cards for the Game Boy Advance were released that you could connect to your GameCube. And these e-reader cards would allow you to scan in new trainers into a special battle that would allow you to get new Shadow Pokemon not featured in the game previously.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, this feature was entirely cut from the North American release, and these cards are incredibly valuable and rare.
I bet. I'm sure a lot of the e-reader cards, just in general, are pretty valuable.
They are, yeah. I mean, these are probably the most obscure and the most rare. I have a bunch of the Ruby and Sapphire e-reader cards that released in English, and they're pretty valuable.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, just a couple of personal memories about the game. One was, like I said earlier, this game came out when I was in high school, and I remember the day before it came out, I had it pre-ordered at an electronics boutique, or an EB Games maybe it was then.
Yeah.
And I remember calling them the night before and being like, hey, you still have my pre-order, right? You have it in stock, it's coming out tomorrow. And the guy on the phone is like, oh, you can come pick it up now if you want.
Yeah. So you got it one day early. I remember this day.
Yeah, I was like, Mom, can we please go to the mall?
You took the next day off school.
Yes, I was able to convince my mom to let me stay home the next day, and I stayed up all night that night.
Yeah, I remember. I was at school.
And you're like, what the heck? Where's Taylor?
Right.
And I come the next day, and I'm like, I've been playing Pokemon Coliseum. It's the greatest
already
thing
beat
ever
it.
made. No, that took me a few weeks to get through.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I had a strategy guide or anything like that yet. Yeah, like that was a big deal for me. I replayed the entire game during the pandemic. I got a real hankering for it. And something fun that I did after beating it, I had purified all the Pokemon. And I was like, that Japanese bonus disc lets you get Celebi if you have a completed save file for Pokemon Go. Or for Pokemon Coliseum. And a couple years earlier, I had purchased a Japanese copy of Pokemon Coliseum that someone had included the bonus disc inside the case of the game. I was like, I have the bonus disc. I was like wondering, like, is there some way that I can somehow get this Japanese bonus disc to recognize my American save file? And I have a kind of disc that lets me region unlock my GameCube so I can play any game. It's like a action replay disc.
Okay, I have one of those.
And it lets you boot any region game. And so I also am able to extract the save files thanks to this action replay disc. I can run some special software on my GameCube. And so what I did is I backed up my English save file. Mm-hmm. I took it to a hex editor online, and I was able to edit the specific line of code that changes a save file from being like North American or like Japanese. It's literally just like changing like a couple bytes. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, I changed it. I put it back on the memory card. I launched the Japanese bonus disc, and there it goes. It recognized my save file as being a Japanese save file. I got the cool Celebi animation, and Celebi was loaded onto my save file, and then bring the save file back to the computer, reconvert my save file to English.
I thought you said that this thing gives you Jirachi.
No. The Japanese bonus disc gives you Celebi as a bonus for 100%ing the base game.
Got it.
The American bonus disc had nothing to do with Pokemon Coliseum, really.
Okay, all right. I got you.
Yeah. So I then took, I reconverted the save to my North American file, and I logged into my game, and inside the PC box is the Japanese event Celebi. Mm-hmm. So I was able to transfer that, to my games. I took it all the way through Pokemon Bank and then into home.
You didn't sit there and try to get a shiny soft reset?
No, I don't think the Celebi is soft resettable. It's a totally different function. You're not connecting it to a Game Boy in that moment.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, it was pretty cool to... I didn't read any, like, tips on how to do that. I don't know if I'm the first person to think to do this.
Yeah.
But it worked. Yeah. And I thought for sure I was going to, like, corrupt my save file or something. But just changing that one byte of text, it got the disk to recognize it no problem, deposit it correctly into the save file.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my most recent Pokemon Coliseum memory.
Gotcha. Pretty good. Yeah, I just remember and my first like impression of that area of the game. I got there and I'm like, this is the grittiest Pokemon game that's ever existed. I mean, funny enough, the game was rated E.
Yeah. But, like, if you didn't know any better, this would be, like, a mature-rated Pokemon game. Like,
teen, at least.
Yeah, just visually. Yeah. It has, like, a...
It looks adult.
Dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, very dangerous. Just the concept of an underground city with neon lights and...
Yeah, when you go into it for the first time, it's like, whoa.
Just crazy. And then just, like, sewer water around...
Yeah.
Like surrounding it, just crazy.
It almost has like a Final Fantasy VII-ish kind of
it does
look to it.
Crystal Dynamic was the team, right?
No, Genius Sonority.
That's right.
Who, after Pokemon Coliseum and its sequel, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, they went on to do Pokemon Battle Revolution for Wii, right? Which unfortunately did not feature any story RPG content. It was just like a stadium style game.
Good one.
But the Pokemon Company, Game Freak, absorbed most of their employees, and they all started to work for Game Freak and work on the proper Pokemon games. And Genius Sonority is a much smaller company now. They still actually do work with the Pokemon Company. They develop stuff like Pokemon Shuffle, Pokemon Cafe Remix, and a lot of their kind of smaller mobile-centric efforts.
Gotcha.
So they're still out there, but they're not equipped in any way, shape, or form to give us
another one.
Pokemon Coliseum 3,
Yeah.
We should mention the sequel real quick, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. It's a direct follow-up to Pokemon Coliseum, but it is there's a new protagonist, but there are a lot of recurring characters, a lot of recurring locales. It recycles a lot of stuff from Pokemon Coliseum. Yeah. It only adds a handful of new areas. you are largely revisiting
the same
stuff. And for the first, I never beat it back then because I felt it was a little derivative.
Mm-hmm.
But during the pandemic, after I did Coliseum, I was like, okay, time to do XD finally.
Can you run through the grass in that game and like find wild Pokemon?
Okay, so that's something we should mention. Pokemon Coliseum had 0 wild Pokemon. You only captured Pokemon from trainers that had Shadow Pokemon.
Right.
Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness did have wild Pokemon, sort of. You could leave treats in these particular locations and return to that location like 10-15 minutes later, and a wild Pokemon could be there. Mm-hmm. But when I say wild, we're talking like a pool of like 3 or 4 Pokemon per locale.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So no random battles in the grass.
Okay.
But you could catch non-shadow Pokemon.
So, you probably know this story, but I got ripped off hard by GameStop back in the day when XD came out. I pre-ordered the game, and I can prove it because I have the pre-order bonus sealed still, the GameCube skin. And when the game came out and I came back, they told me they didn't have my copy or they couldn't find my pre-order. And I just never got one. It was already sold out, after that.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm sure they got a restock eventually. I know for me, I didn't even have it pre-ordered. I remembered that it had come out like a week earlier or something.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, I got it at the GameStop just down the street from here. My mom was shopping at Target or something. I was like, oh, I'm going to go to GameStop real quick. And they still had XD, and they had the pre-order bonus, and they, gave me both when I picked up the copy.
Gotcha.
But yeah, the pre-order bonus was like the skin for your GameCube.
Yeah, it was a sticker.
I never put skins on my
No,
consoles,
I didn't either. And
but I wanted...
I kept that sealed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just didn't get the game because that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have had the game.
What's cool about XD was Shadow Lugia.
Yeah.
Which was not just a normal Shadow Pokemon. Lugia got like essentially an alternate form, like a complete redesign of what Lugia looked like. Like his color scheme and everything was different. He didn't just have like a shadowy aura around him like the other Shadow Pokemon do.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, the whole point of the game is like, or a big part of the game is getting this Lugia and like purifying him ultimately. And like Pokemon Coliseum, you could get Ho-Oh into your Game Boy Advance games. This would allow you to get Lugia into your games. And what was really special about this Lugia is that it knew Deoxys' signature move, Psycho Blast or something like that, which it's not something that Lugia can ever learn normally. Gotcha. And that's the only way to get Lugia with that move.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it was fun to finally replay that during the pandemic as well.
Yeah.
We've largely come to an end here.
Yeah.
This is going to be our shortest episode ever.
Wow, we actually did it.
We actually made a short episode.
Wow. What, a minute and 32?
An hour and 32 minutes, yeah.
That's what I meant.
So again, apologies for this being pre-recorded, but we wanted to make sure we didn't have an off week.
Yeah.
And so while there's not a whole lot of... I'm sure there's going to be some big breaking news that we're going to have to wait.
We're just going to have to... Yeah.
Yeah.
Just going to have to deal with
I hope you enjoyed, us revisiting some memories.
It was a good 10th episode.
Yeah.
End transmission.